Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening. On a grim, kind of rainy kind of night. The nights that I used to love to sit in the bar and say, yeah, I'll be home in a little while. I'll be home in a little while. It's raining, buses are late, train is late, missed the boat. 2-3 days later, I got up. That was then, this is now. My name is Matty and I am an alcoholic. Hey. I am a member of the East Naples Men's Group.
Dilly.
My sobriety date is March 31st, 1989. I'm also a lifetime member of the Belford Clearview Group, which meets on Tuesday nights in Middletown, New Jersey. And for both meetings, I'm forever grateful. And I'll be straight up honest with you. Step 9 for me, and I shared a little bit last week, was the boogeyman, as the 12 and 12 talks about. It was the only step that I was really fearful for. You know, I wanted to, when I was working with Ronnie to do this, you guys are, a lot of you guys and ladies and gentlemen have been here for the past 8 weeks, and I really do appreciate that. Just another quick review. Let's just, if you have under a year sobriety, just raise your hand, that's all. Awesome. This message, the steps, how I try to present them as they were presented to me, is a way for, hopefully for you guys to learn the way that I learned. Clear-cut directions, work has to be done, and this was the one that I feared the most. I shared with you guys, even in the beginning, I kept looking at 9 and saying there is no way. I wasn't worried about the financial amend part of it, but I was worried about having to sit face to face with people that I had harmed. And I told you that funny little story last week about, my ongoing love-hate relationship with my first sponsor, Ronnie Schreiber. And this step 9 was Ron and my swan song. I had gotten sober with him. You know, it's amazing, and we'll touch a little bit more as we finish up 9 through 12. But it's amazing the things that happen to us by just practicing a few simple things. You know, when I got here, Sheldon knows my friend Billy, my first sponsee, and he gave me the name The because I would sit at, early in this part of my early recovery, early 80s, 7-Up had a commercial that they were called the Cola, right? That against Coke and Pepsi. And when I would go out and tell my story, I would say, when I got here, I was broken. I was unemployable. I was unteachable. I was unlovable. And most people wanted for me to be unforgettable. And he gave me the name of the And it's not like that today because of the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. Quick review, right? The quick Ray O'Keefe review. Steps 1, 2, and 3. Stops the bleeding. It's the emergency room. It's the triage. You come up, beat up, cut up, broken. We put you back together. We stop the bleeding. Steps 4 and 5, you go upstairs, get a semi-private room. Doctors, nurses come in, and they start piecing you back together. 4 and 5. 6 and 7, you start to develop an understanding who you are. Who am I? You look at those defects of character that made you first the alcoholic that you were, and now that person in early recovery, and your life is going to change. And then steps 8 and 9 are about my relationship. 6 and 7, my relationship with God. And 8 and 9 is about looking at myself and others and the harms done. So I always share with you guys, as Ron and I did this, we always named each one of the steps. If you remember last week, this was piggybacked. I normally never do, and Jimmy doesn't, we don't do it. You know, I try to do 6 and 7 separately, 8 and 9 separately. But when they're piggybacked, a lot of times it was done that way. So we named steps 8 and 9 the repair steps, right? Step 8 was repair the damage, and step 9 was repair the past. I have to look squarely at my past. So it comes down to, and we always start off with the prayer. Now, tonight's quiz, I'm accepting multiple choice answers. So who wants to tell me the principle behind step 9? Braden.
Justice.
Accepted, but not the one I was looking for. Next.
Forgiveness.
Close.
Discipline.
What's that?
Discipline.
That's usually step 10. How about Jana?
Discipline.
That's 10.
Look it up. Perseverance. Look it up.
We got ready.
9 is responsibility. Right? And discipline is on some of those little charts. Discipline is also there. But 36 years ago, I used responsibility. So we've always opened up with a prayer. I'm not sending it to Clarissa this week because she should know it. So Ashley, will you read the prayer about how are we responsible? Right there on the wall.
I am responsible when anyone, anywhere reaches out for help. I want the hand of AA always to be there, and for that I am responsible.
All right.
Thank you. So I'm going off the principle of responsibility. That was the prayer that was there. And then in my notes, that was adopted at the 1965 International Convention in Toronto. And I was told a fellow by the name of Al S., who was a grapevine editor, was the one that put those words together. And they're with us for quite some time, right? Since 1965. So we'll get right into it. Here's what he told me to do when I got to there after we had gone over the definition of harmed. Right, I threw out, remember I said to you, I presented him the doctor that hit me on the ass to the last bartender I stiffed. And then we threw all that out and we went on the definition of harmed. And he made me write it down. Harm. The definition of harm, first he said to me, amends must be made. Remember, harmed. The definition of harm is a physical or mental damage or injury, something that causes someone or something to be hurt, to be broken, to be made less valuable, or to be made less successful. That hurts for us as the alcoholic. When I have to go back and look at the persons that I harmed and look at my part in them and then follow that path to make those amends, I was afraid. Fear would knock in and come in. And he told me, it's what you'll hear all the time. What's our primary purpose? To stay sober and to help another alcoholic, right? What are the main suggestions that we have? Well, first of all, don't pick up the first drink. Get a sponsor. Join a home group and get active in that group. This is the step where sponsorship is the ultimate pinnacle of direction that you'll need. You have to have someone guiding you through this. Because if it's done incorrectly, hurtful things could still happen. So that's how important it is to have a sponsor. At least that's, what I was told. So what I'm going to do tonight is for, the next 10, 15, 20 minutes or so, I'm going to go over how I learned about step 9. And then semi-reluctantly, I'll share with you my personal experiences on what I had to do to clear away the wreckage of my past. I shared this when I first got to Monmouth County, and I've spoken of this. There was a clubhouse there called the Loft. It's still there. It's in Seabright, New Jersey now, and it's in a basement, but it used to be in a loft. And that was the first time that I went in. I was in Jersey maybe a month or two, and they were doing, I shared with you guys, Friday nights at 8 o'clock, they had a little Red Book meeting, and I was introduced to that, and I got to know a little bit about that part there about what it was. And I would learn these things there. And I would sit there and I would hear these things like that on what I wanted to do. And when I got to the 9th step, it was key. I've already had moved from Hudson County, New Jersey. I finished my first 9 with Ron. I'm about, I don't know, less than a year in. And it was time to do that. So when I sat down and met these men, and they would then show me the way. So I first heard, one guy came back from this group. I joined the group there, and he came back he was down in Miami, went to the North Miami Men's Group. You've heard me mention his name a number of times. And he came back with a double-sided cassette, 3 on one side, 3 on the other, of the 12 steps done by Ray O'Keefe. And when I was listening to it again today, and I wanted what Ray wanted on step 9. I've already stopped drinking. I'm months in. My life is starting to get better. Why can't bygones be bygones? Right? Everybody sees I'm doing good. Isn't that good enough? Isn't that good? Can I have that? Because then it took all the pressure, all the fear, all the things that I needed to go to do that I didn't want to do. I'll be honest with you. Why? Because I was afraid being a people-pleasing, egocentric person with an inferiority complex, right? Mrs. Delaney, egomaniac with an inferiority complex. That was me. And I shared with you guys, I wanted to be the best, flashiest, best-looking, best-dressed center fielder on my team. But please don't hit me the ball. Okay? Fear. God forbid I drop it. What if we lose the game? It's like the first inning. What this, what that. It just would overcome me. And as I grew older, what took that away? The first time I drank a Heineken and I swilled some Southern Comfort. That took that away. So here we are on step 9. And when we got down to that, and Pat is here, and we talked about, in the book there and the charts and who it was. So then when I went to Ron with the word harmed, we were able to figure it out. So in the big book we start, and who do I want to? Serbia, you want to read? What is step 9?
Step 9, we make direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others.
Okay. Good. The we is a given. It's not on there, but that's okay. And here's how I understood it, right? Made direct amends to such people. I thought it said whenever possible, meaning next week, next month, next year, whenever I get around to it. But what does it say? Wherever possible. Wherever was told to me means now. Right now. Wherever you are, stop what you're doing and get to it. And that was the little pushes and stuff that I needed from my sponsor. So then we got in and, he would always open the book. And we started on, right on page 77. Put a little clip in it this time so I get to it quicker. So we started on 77. And here's what we would go over. When fear would come in, and I would pray about it with him or by myself, and we're told we don't use this as an excuse from shying away from the subject of God. That's when we're going out. You're preparing yourself to speak to other people. A lot of them already know that, it's like Bill talking to Ebby, and he said, what happened to you? I got religion. We get sober. And it's God's grace that gets us sober. So people pick up on that right away. And then he said to me about the importance of the face-to-face when we made the list. And he reminded me, as we did here, there's 3 rules when it comes to that. And the precursor to that is it's harder to go to an enemy than to a friend. but we find it much more beneficial to us going to the enemy. We go to him in a helpful and forgiving spirit, confessing our former ill feelings, and here's the key, expressing our regret. The book will later go on. A half-mumbled apology means nothing. I'm sorry means nothing, right? I'm sure every one of us in this room have told everyone that we loved and hurt, I'm sorry, countless times. It loses its weight. It loses its meaning. Why can't we let bygones be bygones, right? So, rule number 1, under no condition do we criticize such a person or argue when we're making these amends. Simply tell them, here's the instruction, simply tell them that we will never get over our drinking until we have done our utmost to straighten out the past. We are there to sweep off, here's a sentence that has been in almost every AA room I've ever been in, that we hear it is. We are there to sweep off our side of the street, realizing that nothing worthwhile can be accomplished until we do so. Rule number 2, we never stop trying. We don't ever tell them what to do. And then rule number 3, his faults are never discussed. We stick to our own. If our manner is calm, if I'm not losing my temper, if it's somebody that really hurt me and I hurt them back and I want to settle the score, that's not making an amends. That's not good spiritual ground. You have to be prepared. You talk these over with your sponsor well before you do that. Because you have to have a calm manner, frank and open. We will be gratified with the result. Frank and open, Frank. There you go. Right? You're given promises all throughout the book. And this is one of my favorites because it happened to me. It happens to most guys that I know that clean their side of the street and made all their amends. In 9 cases out of 10, the unexpected happens. Mostly good. Some bad, but mostly good. So then when we went, put this down a second. We got into, after I had done that with them, we broke it down into 4 categories. Who was I to make amends to? Family, friends, which included girlfriends or relationships that I was in. So we had family, friends, relationships, work, creditors, and then anyone that's deceased, the different columns, and we went over all of those there. And then we would go back to the book. Classic. See you there next year. 3rd paragraph on page 82. I touched about it a little bit here, but this is one that never grows old. If you're my age or not, or if you've taken any of your kids or to your grandkids, I always use this visual. Picture Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz and what a tornado looks like in your mind. Look at all those houses that are being blown around in the sky. And here we are, male or female. This guy just happens to be the farmer, so he's a man. The alcoholic is like a tornado roaring his way through the lives of others. Hearts are broken. Sweet relationships are dead. Affections have been uprooted. Selfish and inconsiderate habits have kept the home in turmoil. And here we are, the grandiose, self-centered, self-justified, sugar-coated, son of a bitch alcoholic saying to Ma, ain't it grand the wind stopped blowing? Right? We've leveled the playing field. And what's our reaction? The wind stopped blowing. When I went to the loft meeting where this started there and there, I heard a guy discuss it, and I told him I'm going to borrow that all the time about what step 9 is. And when we discuss it on there, and it's in one of the parts of the literature, it's about clearing away the wreckage of your past. And when he was talking, he would say, remember a lot of new people, he would say, picture one of those, newsreels from whenever. And you would see it, horrible plane crash. And you would see, if they ever had a video, you would see some 747 crashing down into like a cornfield, right? And it's just wreckage of the plane. But not everybody dies. And that's the point that he made. Not everybody dies. Our job as the alcoholic is to clear away that wreckage. We go to the crash site and we start pulling it out. And we take broken pieces of it and put it away to one side. And we put it away to another side. And we're looking for the survivors. It was a little convoluted, I thought, for step 9, but I could fully understand it. I could visualize it. It was easy for me to understand that. And here's the part I was just talking about there. Fear starts to subside for me. Because yes, there was a long period of reconstruction ahead. Restitution, reconstruction, all these R's, a lot of R's when it comes to step 9, right? Here it is, Nana. A remorseful mumbling that we are sorry won't fill the bill at all. A remorseful mumbling. Can't even articulate it. You're mumbling it. Because why? Because you're afraid. Most of the time you can't even look them in the eye. It's not going to work. It's not going to work. So we start with the family. So we clean house with the family, asking each morning in our meditation. By now, you've got 8 steps down. You're on your way, right? Show us the way. So we clean the house with the family, asking each morning in meditation. By now you're praying and meditated. We ask, my favorite word about God, we ask that our Creator show us the way of patience, tolerance, kindliness, and love. Some pretty sweet words for those of us that had every sweet relationship we destroyed. And these are the catchphrases that if you do it correctly and honestly, with remorse, you'll start to feel this. They'll start to feel it. Patience, tolerance, first 2 things that you do, and then if you're lucky, you'll get kindness and love. Here's a fact. The spiritual life is not a theory. Right? We learned early on in AA 101 in the big book, any words that were ever squiggly or italicized were important because they had to pay extra for them. The spiritual life is not a theory. And they were they were handing out phony stock certificates to get the book published and Works Publishing. So the spiritual life is not a theory. We have to live it. And then later on we'll get into it. We'll get into the 9th step promises, which, right? You're amazed when we're what?
True.
There we go. People would say, halfway through what? Halfway through your 9th step, you'll be amazed because that fear is leaving. It's gone. Most 9 out of 10 people are re-accepting you. They're understanding. You're starting to feel good about yourself. And here's because you may get one, I got 1 or 2, but as God's people, again, God's people, children of God, we stand on our feet. We've made this resolution. I'm going to face it. I'm going to honestly do it. The rest is up to them. As God's people, we stand on our feet. We don't crawl before anyone. We don't beg. We ask for forgiveness. We admit our wrongs. We're cleaning our side of the street. And nobody loves to clean more than I do. So that's right. So then Ron and I would continue. I'm not going to read the promises. Everybody, we pretty much know what they are there. Why not? because it's in my notes, and I had it for so many longs, all right? And I had the promises -9 smiley thing halfway through, right? If we're painstaking, and here's what he made me do. I had to highlight the we in every part of it. Highlight the we. There's 11 we's and 3 us's in the promises, in case there's a quiz on that down the road. If we are painstaking about this phase of our development, we'll be amazed before we're halfway through. We're going to know a new freedom and a new happiness. We will not regret the past nor wish to shut the door on it. We will comprehend the word serenity, and we will know peace. Peace. Oh, man. No matter how far down the scale we have gone, we will see how our experience can benefit others. That feeling of uselessness and self-pity will disappear. We will lose interest in selfish things and gain interest in our fellows. Self-seeking will slip away. Our whole attitude and outlook upon life will change. Fear of people and economic insecurity will leave us. We will intuitively know how to handle situations that used to baffle us. We will suddenly realize that God is doing for us what we could not do for ourselves. And then the question, are these extravagant promises?
We think not.
None. There's a guy in my home group back in Jersey. I think I have a couple more years than he does. His name is Big Joe Grenna.
Damn right.
You can go on Facebook and you see him. Every time that question is said, when it says, are these extravagant promises? And his answer is, of course they are. You know, and I sat down, I said, why do you got to be like that? And he says, think about it. Are they extravagant promises? I mean, if you think they are pretty much extravagant, you know? But if you're working for them and they're coming to you and you're getting them, the word extravagant doesn't seem there. It becomes part of your psyche, of your core. And then we're going into step 10 there, so. And we went into the Red Book, and like I told you about after hearing about the plane crash and getting that visual and stuff there. And this was the part that they'll break it down in here for the Red Book, Group 1 friends, families, just like I have, creditors and deceased. But the part that spoke to me directly when we would do this every week and study it, and especially with Ninth Step when I knew. And when I moved to Jersey, I was like almost through all my Ninth Step coming down when I moved down the shore. And here's the direction that this little Red Book gave me. It's phenomenal. And if your mind is open and you can understand it and you're on good spiritual ground, then you'll understand these words. The written word on the page is so powerful. So the book tells us before we can settle the harm done to others, we must eliminate the source of moral and physical devastation within ourselves. This book always talked about the physical part of our disease, how it affects our bodies and our minds, and then they would get into the spirit. Alcoholism is our illness. Again, the physical, right? It caused the injuries we imposed on our families, on our friends, and those loved ones who have since departed. Our alcoholism accounts for our indebtedness. It is responsible for our impaired physical condition. It has brought us irrational thinking, insane behavior, and spiritual sickness. Spiritual sickness. Here's how we start. Some guys agree, some don't, but this is what the book said, so that's what I did. We make amends to ourselves, to the personalities we were becoming when we were alcoholic. So by understanding my sickness and by illuminating those defects of character, I'm able to eliminate them from my life. I take intelligent physical care now of my body. By restoration of my mental sanity, right? Step 2, Paul that always talks about it. Step 2, they talk about the insanity. And guess what? It's like you're on the beach and you meet Barbara Eden and she's got a lamp and you get 3 wishes. And your first wish is you've been restored to sanity. Step 9. What do you want? I want to be restored to sanity. Right? And there you are.
Absolutely. More.
Yeah.
More than half.
Yeah. Who? Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I Dream of Genie was a show back in the 60s. Think of Aladdin. Think of Big Blue Aladdin. There you go. Shows where my head is at. I'm looking for the girl with the midriff, not the big blue guy. Yeah. That's it. That'll be on my future 9-step list.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, lust, it'll do it to you. There you go. Where did I leave off? Spiritual illness, that's right. Okay. Yeah. This recourse, let's get back to it. This recourse is for us to understand and to practice God's will. Remember, I gave you what I thought God's will was. I used my radio station, WPLJ. Work, prayer, love, joy. If I'm doing this, if I'm doing the work, if I'm praying, if love, because God is love. 1 Corinthians 13. God is love. Love never fails. It always perseveres. God is love. The alcoholic's rehabilitation is contingent now the work part starts, on the amends. 6 and 7 are lifetime. 8 and 9, 8 is your list, can always be added to. 9th is it's a lifetime. And here's how they describe it, and again in italics. The alcoholic's rehabilitation is contingent upon amends and will be as long as he or she lives. When I mentioned this, the loft meeting there, I'm there about a year, and they had just started this book, and one of the guys who was the co-founder of the meeting, when we got to the 9th step, he got up in the middle of the meeting and he left. Dean, I think his name was. And we asked the guys that I was now friendly with, home group neighbors, I said, what happened? Where did Dean go? And he said, when he was doing the part of the 9th step, someone said something that triggered something that had happened to him, that he had 20-something years, that he had to make an amends. This shows you what this man was like. He left the meeting that night, got on a plane the next morning, knew where this individual was in California, and went and made amends. Talk about willing to go to any length, right? Willing to go to any length. I don't know if I could do that. I mean, I'm trying to figure out inadvertently, how am I going to pay back some of the money I borrowed? This guy's getting on a plane and flying out to California. Tremendous. I'm going to get into it. All right, so here we go. Let's see if I have any smart kids in this class. What's the difference between an apology and amends? What's an apology? Okay. An apology is a regret. You're regretting it. An amends is to make right. Right? I'm sorry is not an amends. Step 9 is a lifetime process. Meditation and prayer are necessary. And then I go into Ray. Ray had good things. I know Pat knows this. The greatest example of step 9 happened on June 10th, 1935, where a drunken Dr. Bob had just gotten back from his trip to Atlantic City. And Bill goes and gets him, and he's got surgery the next morning, and they give him a couple goofballs, a couple bottles of beer, and he goes, performs the surgery. And you know the story. Bob's nowhere to be found. See, prior to that, Bob had made a promise. I'll do all your Oxford group stuff, I think, just to paraphrase it, but I can't go and make these kind of amends. The fear of his reputation, of what people thought about him, he couldn't do it. And then that day after that, when he was gone for hours, and they're wondering, where's Dr. Bob? He was out knocking on doors to everybody that he knew, telling them about his alcoholic lifestyle and the amends that he had to make. So I always say all 12 steps of the program is one big amend. And AA is born on an amend. Think about it, right? How cool is that? The nights that promises we went, we're out of the throes of our alcoholism, when we restore to sanity like there, life becomes wonderful. Most times it does. It becomes wonderful. Because we are accepting our responsibility, and that feeling of isolationism goes. You know, I shared many times, I'd sit in a bar, I was a bar guy, and I would sit there and 200-300 people in clubs and bars, you know, and I would sit there looking at the mirror and carry on these phony BS gregarious conversations that you do in bars, right? And still be the loneliest man in the room. And what took that feeling in the pit of your stomach, that loneliness? Then we have another. Oh yeah, and buy everybody else a drink. And meanwhile, as I share with you, you know, I'm 18 months behind in my mortgage payment. But I'm buying drinks, you know. Character defect, you better believe it. So there we go. Good judgment. And the process starts when we first start. And just a quick 12 and 12. Here's the direction. First, we will wish to be reasonably certain that we're on the AA beam, right? You've talked to your sponsor, you're going to go, and now you got to be on that beam. We talk about the beam all the time. Sometimes it's a broad universe, broad highway. Sometimes it's like walking on a thread, a slender thread. But here we are. First, we will wish to be reasonably certain that we're on the beam. And then when these amends starting, you're getting into it. We're told this could happen, because it happened to me and countless of men that I sponsored who were deathly afraid that they were going to, you know, Arthur's not here. When his line is, don't you ever come back and darken our doorway again. That's the relationships we had. But it tells us even our severest and most justified critics will frequently meet us more than halfway through on our first trial. Okay. Here's my personal stuff with step 9. Right, I've gone over all my stuff. It's family. I started with my mom and dad first. I had only been married at this point a few years. Half of that, I was dry. I hadn't been drinking, smoking a lot of weed and other stuff, but I wasn't drinking. But life was even so much better just by not drinking. So I had my mom and dad, and we sat down for me to make my amends. And things happened that you'll never forget. My mom's father, my mom was one of 8. His name was Frank Kelly. He died when my mom was 10 or 12 years old. And I never met him naturally, but I was told I look just like him. Remember, I shared that Anne Irene story at my brother's wake about, because I reminded her of Frank Kelly, why she hated me so much. And I'd come to find that Frank was charming. He was a hardworking guy, never cheated on my grandma, but was a flirt and loved to be the center of attention. And he died on the job. He was a house painter. And I would come to find out that while intoxicated, he slipped off the ladder and died. And I never knew that. So I'm learning these are the things that you learn when you sit down and do it. And I always said Mom and Dad were like the low-hanging fruit, and I shared so many things with them, and we cleared away the wreckage of that. I was sharing with Janet before when I was doing my prep work here. Here it is, 30-something years later. And you get to think of things that you might have missed or things like that. And when I got to, on the deceased column, thinking about original Stevie B isn't there. Mrs. Delaney that ran Alina Lodge looked like my grandmother. And this was a amends I had to make to the deceased. And here's the background on that quickly. I'm 17 years old, and she had 28 grandkids, I think, and I was one of her favorites, naturally,
Well.
Charming. Yeah, Graham, what can I do for you? She was the one I told you later on was my licensed driver. All I had to do was get her a little thing in Matty Concord grape and her butts, and she would drive around with me. So when she got married in 1922, as a wedding present, my grandfather bought her what would become to be known as the Fearon Farm up in Chatham, New York. She had 58 acres, and it was a big farmhouse. And that's where we went every summer as kids. So here it is now, I'm 17 years old. I have my license. We're at Party Central. It's the beginning of the summer, right before school was ending. And I decide I'm going to ask Grandma. None of my friends had seen the Fearon Farm. So we're going to go and have like a mini Woodstock up there. Right, we're going to camp out in the farm. So cases of beer, all the dry goods you could want. Unfortunately, some of the girls that were invited were like underage. So one told this one, told that one that they were going to sleep over somebody's house. And they got caught. We all got caught. And the phone rings, everybody's wasted, and the phone rings, and it's my father on the line. And he said, "You have an hour to get your ass back home." And it was like, oh my God, and so we pack everything up and there. So I naturally never thought anything about it, and I apologized to my grandmother, but our relationship then had changed. It wasn't the same. The harm. And then I would look at it and was sharing a little bit later, but years later I get to realize that all my brothers and sisters and the other 20-something cousins were never allowed to have the key to the Fearon Farm because she couldn't trust them. And that was because of my behavior. My behavior. Things that you forget about. Amends that, that's just one of the many things. God will present to you the amends that you need to be. I have my friend Gene O'Neill. We grew up together. We ran together. I speak to him quite often. 5 years ago, I'm running a golf outing down in Jackson, New Jersey. And Gene's part of my foursome. And he's my age, and he's like crippled up. And he can hardly even tee up the ball. And everybody's making fun of him, and I would never make fun. I was never like that. And they're breaking his chops about that. So I just went, I said, "Gene, are you okay?" He said, "Matty, I've never been the same from the accident." I said, "You were in an accident?" And remember I shared with you guys, Gene and I are 17 years old, up at the Steak and Brew in Munson, New York, had just broken the 2-man beer drinking pitcher record. And me driving home drunk, ran the car off the road. I went through the windshield. Gene was thrown out of the car. We were both weeks in the hospital. And he said, from that accident, and it cut me like a knife. The next morning I called Gene. Gene hasn't drank in 40 years. He's not a program guy, but he knew he had to stop drinking. And I called him the next day to say, "Gene, I'm in AA, and I have to do this to make things right." And he says, "Brother, I forgot it a long time ago. You don't know how proud we are, because things happen. Your behavior happens. Things change for you there." And then when I got to the work part and the bosses and people that I had, and again, I was sharing some of my stuff with Jana there and thinking of, who did I hurt? Who did I harm? Well, there were nights that I wouldn't leave after hours or never show up for work, and I had a great union job. But I was supposed to be there at 9 o'clock in the morning with 2 young women that were brand new, that one was a single mom and one was raising her family. And I was supposed to open up and get them in there. And I was nowhere to be found. How it affected them. How they were tainted by this behavior of mine. How it changed their idea of me changed. And I would share with you guys my alcoholism. Remember, I shared the story with the hurt in my father's eyes when my apprenticeship was up and I was eligible to be voted into the union. And I was waiting to hear back from the executive council, and they called me and said, we're sorry to say we've tabled your application. And I would come to find out from someone very close, Matty, they tabled your application. They love you. Like every alcoholic, you have a high intelligence, above earning power, but nobody can trust you because you're a drunk. I'm 22. Father's heart crushed, his reputation crushed. Here's how you make amends. I made amends to those people there. Men in my union that showed me how to get sober. I would follow them to AA, and I would go to meetings with them. A lot of guys heard me speak of Jim Gatens, who passed away a few years ago. He's the one who gave me my 25-year medallion back in the day. And Jim would come to my home group, and all the guys there loved him. And he would tell stories about me. He was the one that, him and two other men took me down to Riverview Hospital, met Dr. Sidgwick. They put the bracelet on my wrist, and what was CA, remember them? Which was Catholic, and he said to me, well, for you it's chronic alcoholic. So that's when, he said, Jim, you can go home. And he said, Matty, this is my first rodeo. There's been a lot of times that I drop you guys off here and you're home before I get home. So, and I stayed. And he affected my, all those people. My friend Wacky Willie that would say, you left a footprint in my sobriety. But here's how you make amends, I'm an remember? I can't. And now I'm sober for a while. And people are hiring me because they said I was an asset. They wanted what I had. Things are going good. I'm getting out of debt. I showed you guys, I got my license back. We bought a house. I'm living the American dream. Things are going good. Somebody asks me hey, you know what? You might be an idea. Why don't you, that executive council of your union that called you and tabled your application, well, one of the guys is retiring. Why don't you think about running? And I ran and I won. And then a couple of years later, I was elected to be vice president of our local. How does that happen? O'Keefe says it best. In your drunken stupidness as you're trying to recover, you put somebody's name on a piece of paper, and 25 years later, you're the vice president of a local. And my first thing that I did was me and the friend Jimmy Gatens. We set up, not a secret, but we set up through the Actors Fund an EPA program to help men and women in our local to get sober. That's the amends. That's that. The financials were made. Everything was done. And today I live a life beyond my wildest dreams, as we hear quite often. So we're going to close with a quote from Bill Wilson. I thought this fit a step 9, and they asked him, Carol, whoops, sorry, guys. So Bill says to his friends in recovery, when you're doing your step work, especially the 9th step, to your family, to my kids, right? To the world, you may be one person, but to one person, you may be the world. Let us always love the best in others and never, 9th step work, never fear the worst. Believe more deeply, hold your face up to the light, although for the moment you cannot see. Remember, ladies and gentlemen, keep your eyes above the waves. Love you. Thank you.